string theory comes along and suggests that inside these particles there is something else.
Turning particles into stories. Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Garsten, and welcome to episode 120 of Tales from the Beat, where we look at news and PR from both sides of the scrimmage line. Well, string theory isn't only for physicists to explain the mysteries of how the universe was born, but there's a distant corollary. You may not have heard this one. A distant corollary just discovered that applies to journalists and PR people, that forms the basis for how great stories can come to life and save lame ones from ending up in a trash bin. Well, string's a term, right? Reporters have used forever for the stuff we gather. It could be interviews, research, images, videos. Like recently, I attended an industry event, had a lot of significant speakers purely to gather string for future stories. So, for instance, all right, big budget production here. Here's a literal piece of string. Okay, literal. There it is. Okay. Now let's say it represents an interview. Here's another one. Some quotes from a presentation, and I still got one more with some information from some infographics from another source, right? I got all these pieces of string from all sorts of places, but as you can see, each strand by itself, kind of wimpy, kind of weak, wouldn't nearly be strong enough to support an entire story. But stay with me here, when you find a common theme and a creative way to tie them together. Yes, I was a Boy Scout many, many, many years ago. Now we've got a pretty strong strand of content here, right? Okay. Okay. Enough for the high tone production here. I'll give you an example using a story I filed recently for Forbes.com. Now, I've been following really an exciting young company for several years that's been developing what's known as electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. The company's called Archer Aviation. Now, I filed a few stories when Archer first hit some significant milestones, but I really couldn't justify a story every time the company put out a news release. However, I told the PR person, please keep sending me their stuff so I can kind of keep up with the company. And it turns out they did have a few big developments over the past few months, including being named the official air taxi provider for the 2028 Summer Olympics coming up in Los Angeles. Well, my intention was to write a sort of a catch-up story for my readers on what Archer is up to using these releases, and an analyst and an interview with the founder and CEO as string for the story. But a couple of days before the interview, a PR person for an Israeli eVTOL and drone startup called Air sent me a release that was embargoed for the next week. Now, it's a pretty good story too, but not really strong enough for an entire story, and I kind of put it in the file. Now, I had two related companies, but just sticking them both in a story wasn't really good enough, and honestly, the Archer story was starting to feel just a little bit too promotional. I needed, one more strand to kind of tie them together, and I found it when President Trump issued an executive order to speed the commercialization of eVTOLs and drones. Well, now I had a newsy lead, an overall theme with which to include both companies. Now, I made sure I got responses from the CEOs of Archer and Air to how the order would affect their businesses. So, right, from various pieces of string connected by a common theme, a stronger story was created. Now, one more important point. I was really honest with the PR people from both companies to not only manage your expectations, but to help them manage the expectations of their clients. Because you know how they tell a PR person, oh, get me in the paper, get me on the air, thinking it's going to be just a commercial for their company. But so we give them an honest view of what the story was really going to be like. But while this honesty isn't really anything new for reporters, gathering string to create solid stories is a practice, honestly, used way too infrequently, I think, anyway, by PR people who are solely focused on publicizing their clients without looking at the broader picture. The results are weak, narrow-minded story pitches that reporters quickly dump into the trash bin. So let me suggest this tactic. It's more work, but it could be the difference between instant rejection and at least stronger consideration. Just as reporters gather string that can be eventually weaved into a story, PR folks, honestly, you need to raise their expectations, their sights, beyond the immediate subject of a release. I mean, unless the release announces some huge development that could possibly stand on its own, more often, to be honest with you, the subject is a thin, self-serving announcement that could never hold up beyond maybe a blurb in a business brief or something like that. The odds of getting a reporter to bite on it are really less than a chance of Elon Musk sending Donald Trump a Valentine's Day card. Nah, that's never going to happen. So, okay. So try crafting your pitches using string theory. Here's a real life example of someone who gets it, gathering string and including it in the pitch about a company's technology to suggest a larger story. At face value, the PR person was trying to sell me on an interview with the CEO of a company that came up with the technology aimed at boosting safety in autonomous vehicles. Now, I'm purposely keeping the name of the company to myself for competitive reasons, of course. But most of the time, that's where the pitch would end. But this PR person obviously understood reporters aren't simply going to give the company what amounts to a free commercial. So she went out, conducted some research on incidents involving self-driving vehicles and how many were caused by this issue the company's technology claims to correct. And she included a few sentences and bullet points of key findings from a government study. Well, I mean, that's the kind of string that could sell a reporter on a legitimate story, of course. The reporter should also conduct independent research since, gosh, wouldn't it be beyond a PR person to present, let's say, a myopic view of what the government found to bolster the story idea? But look, it's a decent start and shows more understanding of what differentiates a blatant promotion for a company with a real news story. My suggestion is, once a PR person is assigned to pitch a client or a release, raise your sights looking into the client company's competition, where the client's product or service fits in to the bigger picture of an issue. Check Google Trends, AI results, see how people are searching for information on related topics, and in particular, what aspects of a subject they're searching. Now, that's enough string then to create a more encompassing story pitch that doesn't reek of an attempt at a free commercial, but an examination of a broader issue or trend, while still spotlighting the client that has a better chance of winning over a journalist, right? Well, in reality, the string theory of creating legitimate, engaging stories by both reporters and PR people is pretty simple, right?
So it's sort of like a guitar string, but instead of making an actual sound, each vibration is a different particle.
Precisely. And when you express it in 11 dimensions, Einstein's relativity equations pop out. Does that sound like a coincidence?
It does not.
Yep. That's what I think.
So did we do it? Did we just solve string theory?
Oh, God.
Yeah, you want to rope in readers and reporters. Find enough strands of string. Tie them together. That's Tales from the Beat for this time around. I'm Ed Garsten. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I'll be back soon with more tales. Take care.